Hello class. Alright, this is a nice problem where you have to use the algebra to calculate the consumer and producer surplus. And one of your colleagues posted this question. I don't really remember where this is, worksheet number 1, but there's a demand equation given and a supply equation and a unit tax, and you have to calculate all the consumer and producer surpluses. So we can do that pretty easy. So I've sketched out the demand curve, and of course the consumer surplus is the area of this triangle up here, and producer surplus is the area of this triangle over here. So let's first calculate those two things. So to get all that, we need to get the equilibrium price and equilibrium output. So setting quantity demanded equal to quantity supplied, I can kind of do this in my head, but if you can't, you should do it out longhand to make sure you get these answers. It would be 1900 plus the 260 on one side of the equation, and I'm going to divide by 5, and so I get an equilibrium price of 432. And that generates an equilibrium quantity, 432 times 2, subtract 260. That generates an equilibrium quantity of 604. Those numbers seem really odd to me, so I'm going to check by taking that 432 and plugging it into the demand equation. So it would be times 3, subtract that mess from 1900, and I get 604, so it must be right. Okay, so I have these two numbers, and now I need this number up here to calculate the area of consumer surplus. So that number up there would be the price that generated 0 quantity demanded. So looking at this equation right here, I'm looking at the p-value, trying to find the p-value where this thing over here is 0. So that would be 1900. Again, I'm sort of doing them in my head a little bit, but you should do them out the long way if you want. So I get a number of 633 and a third. Okay, so now I can find consumer surplus. So consumer surplus is the area of that triangle, and the area of any triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. So the height is, well, here, okay, so it's 1/2. The base was 604. And the height is the difference between 432 and 633 and a third. So this is the height right here. So let's see. So I get the height is 201 and a third. So let's see what that is. So that would be 201 and a third times 604 times 0.5. I get a value of 60802 and 2/3. So that's consumer surplus. Again, it's just the area of that triangle, right? And to find the area of the triangle, all you need to know are its endpoints, which we found. Alright, so now we're going to do the same thing for producer surplus. So producer surplus is this little green triangle down here, and I'm going to need this number. So that's the price, again, that's the price that causes the quantity supplied to be 0. So that would just be 260 divided by 2. So I get this number is 130. Okay, 130. So then the area of that triangle would be 1/2 the base times the height. Again, this is the formula for the area of a triangle. So it would be 1/2 times the base was 604, wasn't it? And now the height is the difference between 432 and 130. So the height is this little distance right here. So So I get the height is 302. So consumer surplus would be 302 times 604 times 0.5. So I get consumer surplus is 91204. 91204. Okay? So I'm going to make a note of that right here. Producer surplus. I can't remember if that's what I said. Producer surplus is 91204. So then total surplus would just be the sum of those two. So it would be 91204 plus 60802 and 2/3, and I get 152,006 and 2/3. So $152,006.66 is the total surplus. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put on a tax, and when we put on a tax, the supply curve is going to shift in like this. We have to find the new supply equation, where this distance right here, wasn't it $60? Let's look back. It was 50. The tax was 50. Alright, so this distance right here is 50. So now we have to find this new equation. Now, in one of those other lessons I gave you kind of a shortcut, and it is you take the tax, 50, you multiply it by the coefficient on P, which is 2, so 2 times 50 is 100. You take that number and you subtract it from the constant term, so it should be QS tax is equal to 2P minus 360. Now, if you're like me and you're kind of uncomfortable with these shortcuts because they're easy to forget, or worse, to get them upside down, you should take this equation, undo Alfred Marshall's mistake, that is, get it in the form y equals mx plus b, and then add the $50, and then put Alfred Marshall's mistake back and make sure you get this number. But I'm pretty sure that's right. Okay, so now we're going to get a new equilibrium here. So we should find what those are. So again, kind of working in my head, it'd be 1900 plus 360 divided by 5. So this number up here is 452. 452. And then of course this number down here, since that's 50, that number down there would be 402, right? 452 minus 50, and this number here be 452 times 2 minus 360. I get 544. Okay? Alright, so now we have to figure out consumer and producer surplus again. So consumer surplus is now this slightly shortened box. I'm going to take my red marker and just kind of mark the triangle now. It's just a little bit less, right? Consumer surplus has been reduced because the price to consumers is higher. So it will be 1/2 the base, which is now 544, times the height, which is 633 1/3, minus 452. So the new height is 181 1/3, and that works out to be I get 49322.6. All right, 49,322.6. Now that's consumer surplus. Now producer surplus, I'm going to take this red marker and try to show you this triangle. It's also reduced. It's the area below the selling price to producers, of course, but above the supply curve. So it's this. Producer surplus is that little area right there. Okay, so it would be 1/2 the base times the height. So the base is still 544, and the height for the producer surplus is the difference between 402 and 130. I get 272. So that works out to be I get producer surplus is now 73984. Producer surplus. I hope you can see that both producer surplus and consumer surplus have been greatly reduced, right? Consumer surplus is now 49,000 and something, and before it was 60,000. And producer surplus is 73,000 now, and before it was 91,000. So they've been greatly reduced, but hey, check it out. There is now some government revenue generated, and we have to figure out how much that is, because after all, that's coming to us, right, in those great government services. So I'm going to take this blue marker and kind of indicate all this government revenue that's been generated. And that's coming to us, hopefully. So how much is that? Well, the government revenue is the area of that rectangle, and the area of a rectangle is just the base times the height. So the base is 544, and the height is $50. So that works out to be 544 times 50 works out to be 27,200. So this is tax revenue generated. Okay. So then the total of the surplus and the monies that the government got would be the sum of all those things. So it would be 27,200 plus 73,984 plus 49,322.6. So I get a total of 150506.6, or $150,506.66. Now keep that number in mind, 150,506.6, and compare it to the total surplus we had before, which was 152,000. So there are two lessons here. One is, can you do the mechanics? Can you actually calculate consumer and producer surplus? And the second lesson is, can you see that in the process of carving out this tax revenue for the government, consumer and producer surplus was lost, but also this was lost and not recovered. This little piece right here was lost. It did not show up as government revenue. It just was lost. It has a funny name. It's called the dead weight loss. Dead weight loss. And I'm not going to do it in this lesson, but if you want to, you can calculate the area of that weird little triangle right there, and it should turn out to be exactly the difference between the original consumer surplus, the original total surplus, and the new total surplus that we got, including government revenues collected. Alright, I hope you found that helpful. Good luck.